Board. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the joint meeting of the Willington Board of Education and the Willington School Building Committee to order. It is Monday, March 26, 2026 at 6:36 p.m. Starting with the School Building Committee, those in attendance are Jeremy Brothers, Adam Salonis, Adam Brewer, myself, James Marshall, and Grossjohn. We have Samantha Sperry online, though she may be having some audio issues. Sam?
I can hear now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We got you, Sam. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
We also have our alternate members, John Tian and Lisa Eaton online. And I am going to make a motion to see John. I see you on screen, so I'm going to move to see John Tian in place of Peter Bacon. Do I have a second? I'll second. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Sam?
Aye.
Thank you. John, you're seated for tonight. Lisa, you are, yes, you're presently on. And Brianna, I'll let you introduce your board of ed members, which we have.
Good evening, I'm Brianna Ross, the chair of the Willington Board of Education. This evening, we're represented by Tracy Anderson, John Mitchell, Ann Bourgeon, and Sam Sperry are doing double duty tonight.
Yes.
And hoping to be joined by our colleague Arthur Christensen. Thanks for having us.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for coordinating this with us. First up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. On the side.
The United States of America, to the world, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everybody.
All right. Right into business. Item 3, old business, educational special care. And with that, what I'll do first is a little introduction. I'll let the Tecton Architects team introduce themselves and they get into it. But we're joined here by members from Tecton Architects, Board of Ed, a little update on where already, and members of the public. We have had Tecton on board with us on the school building committee for the past 2 weeks officially. They have been working very hard and they're really jumping in feet first with us, given the necessities of our anticipated schedule deadline. So they are really working hard to on a due diligence process. They gave a tour of the hall and center school last week, the end of last week. They've had some preliminary discussions related to these ed specs, and they're basically just getting familiar with our facilities and your program. But as part of this effort, it was identified during our procurement process. It was one of the questions that was raised, but the educational specifications need to align with the latest enrollment study that we have that you had performed prior to the school building committee getting on board. So the purpose of this meeting is really to give them a chance as the architects tasked with helping us develop a consolidated school proposal, give them the opportunity to provide insight in their recommendations on the ed spec and ways to align it with the increased enrollment. So if that makes sense, I'll turn the floor over and thank you.
Screen share. So good evening, Chair, members of the boards. My name is Jeff Kwasinski. I'm the principal at Tecton Architects.
My name is Antonia Ciavarella. I am an architectural designer at Tecton Architects.
And I'm Justin Hopkins. I'm senior project manager. So we have a bunch of materials in front of you this evening. A brief slide deck presentation that we're going to go through first. And then we have a couple copies of the enrollment, the educational specifications with the proposed changes. And then Antonia handed out a larger stapled version that has some examples of floor plan layouts, just to put things in context as far as size and schedule. So without further ado, very brief agenda. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt and answer them right then and there. We just went through introductions, want to touch upon understanding your project and then get into the ed spec updates. So we've already had 3 meetings and then 1 walkthrough. So we walked through both buildings on Friday. Very productive to see not only the conditions, but the culture, the operation of the facility, how things work at both schools and both campuses. So that was very helpful. We've already introduced ourselves. We also have building systems engineers that'll be helping with project managers as we move forward with the options. So what would be helpful is to give a high-level overview of our work to date and then some reactions to the information that was provided.
And we know that a critical component of this is your community's history and your landscape and culture within the town at large. We know an important component of that is the Hall Memorial School, the original building. And so we're in this discovery phase along with you, thinking about what's possible for that space. If a portion of it is saved, if components or materials of it are saved, or if there's a way through design that we can honor the architectural aesthetic and history and materiality of this important landmark, and just recognizing the impact that this family has had on the town at large, and some recent improvements through the Hall Foundation. So I think we're mindful of everything that's been invested and everything that this movie means to. Yeah, sure.
So as I mentioned, we walked through both schools, and these are some existing conditions photos, first starting with Center Elementary, and looking at basic observations relative to accessibility code, life safety code, age and condition of materials, identifying things like hazardous materials. So just basically getting a very good, solid understanding of those existing conditions and some of the challenges that exist with these facilities. So articulating those here. Neither of the buildings have fire protection systems in them. That's something, just a point of note that we put on the bottom right-hand corner, just because today's school education facilities they're required to have fire systems, which you've done an awful lot of due diligence, or the community has over the last several years. So I'm sure all of that was previously documented. For Hall Memorial, besides the phenomenal architecture of the original building, in the culture of both buildings, quite honestly, some of the conditions in the hall are in need of significant repair and or replacement of full demolition. So we looked at things like building envelope, roof, windows, doors, those kind of things. Same similar kind of contents relative to the age and condition of interior finishes, accessibility, hazardous materials, fire protection. In both buildings, it's quite interesting, but also a unique challenge to both buildings when we walked through them was the various different levels, floor levels in each of the buildings. So Hall, we counted up to 16 different floor levels in that building and 12 in Center. So, and what we're talking about is there's quite a few stairs, ramps, landings, all kinds of different floor levels in each of the buildings that create unique challenge. We have a little more here, Scott, right? So we just wanted to articulate that in those 2 slides. The other piece that we focused our effort on over the last week and a half, 2 weeks here is taking another look at the size of the existing structures. So we measure things, and we had a conversation about 30 minutes prior to the meeting, Scott and I, about gross in that area. So these are important components to track. The caveat here is these are going to change as we move through the process, right? So the net square footage, gross square footage is going to change. What's important about these 2 slides is we went through, we scanned, we took existing conditions information and measured gross square footage in each of the buildings so that we had a good baseline. And again, we know that you have previous information. We wanted to validate it ourselves, so we are comparing apples to apples when we start getting into the options. So this plan, and we stamped draft on this because we took our best guess. The superintendent was kind enough to mark up the plans on current use. What we're trying to make sure and validate is how you use the existing facility and the square footage is related to that, so that when you're working through the ed spec, you can kind of compare to good baseline to study. So this plan that you see on the screen in front of you, handout, Center Elementary, and then we've also done it for all three levels or main levels at existing Paul Memorial School. So measuring those combination for Center Elementary, you're at 32,797. Existing Paul, you're at 67,597. So those are going to be the baseline gross square footages that we're going to use that we validated with the existing conditions of commission and requirements.
Can you just pause there for a second?
Sure.
That is different from numbers that you have heard in the past. So look at square footage on prior documents. They did their own measurements based upon what was used. I think that's really important that you recognize it. We've talked about Paul being 62,000 square feet. They are documented with a different number based upon the measurements they did.
Yeah, so there's two different ways to measure. Gross is the outside face of the exterior walls. That's important when it comes to budgeting. Those are the numbers we're going to use for budget. Net is inside face of the walls, and you'll get into net usable program area. So those are two differences. I don't want to complicate it this evening, but they're important for us to track as we move through, because one is for budget, one is for reimbursement, right? So we're always focused on maximizing the community's reimbursement, but also making sure that we understand holistically the gross square footage. So the next, sure.
Can we repeat those numbers?
Sure, they're in your folder, but Paul, actually it's on this next slide. Paul is 67,597. Center is 32,797. So the GIS had it a little different. The previous reports had it a little different. I guess the purpose of us doing it is to be consistent from this point forward with all the material that we're using for our analysis. Okay. So this slide, so left side of this slide combines the two schools. So what we thought would be interesting was to track what you have today, gross square footage, what the allowable area is for the state guidelines, which is, and I'll get into this in a minute, which is 79,372 square feet. And then our proposed program, which is 89,791. So let's call it 90,000. So your existing building, when you combine the two, it's 100,000. The program that sits in front of you today, the ed spec, is basically 90,000. So what that represents is around about a 10%. I think that's why I rounded it for myself. But about a 10% efficiency. So we think that's an important kind of milestone baseline just for the community to understand as we move forward in those discussions. The next piece we're going to try to tackle in the most simplest way possible is the state, and I'm sure you've heard this before as well, is looking for the highest enrollment in an 8-year window at the time of your grant application, right? And the reason why they want to know that is because they don't want to see you back, right? So they want you to make sure that you're right sizing your building. So this slide shows, left side was the previous study, the NASDAQ study. The right side of this slide on the screen is the Peter Prada updated numbers, I'm assuming for October of 2025. So every year, the October enrollment is projected, looking at a variety of different things that's happening in the community. We want to look at the 519, right? The reason why we want to look at that number is on the next slide. So in this, again, what I want to make sure, these numbers will likely change slightly, as we move through the process, modestly, we're not gonna go from a 90,000 square foot building to, 60 or 150,000. They're gonna move, few students here or there, couple square foot here or there, as we fine tune the concepts in the program. The form, which you don't expect you to read on the left side, is the latest state form. And state has come out with quite a few different new forms over the last year and a half, 2 years. This is the latest one. This doesn't necessarily relate to the way that they used to calculate the space square footage in the old tables. This is a form that you fill in, basically you plug in 519 students, pre-K to 8, and it calculates the square footage. That's your allowable area. Why this slide is important is because if you do, what this is telling you is that you're allowed to build a building, and if you equalize net and gross like we talked about before, look at the darker blue on the screen. What they're saying is for 519 students times our allowable square foot per student, you're allowed to build a building around 80,000 square feet. That's what we'll reimburse you for if you follow the rules. Many communities, because this formula sometimes works, sometimes doesn't really work. Pre-K to 8s are difficult because you're trying to program a wide range of elements in a wide range of grade levels, right? Pre-K all the way up to grade 8. There's a lot of programming that you need to fit in. So that metric doesn't always work. We're working with, and I know Scott does as well, many communities in Connecticut that ask for what's called a space waiver. You can do that via their new space waiver form, which is after you have you submit your grant application and during the design process, typically. Or you can ask for special legislation to get a space waiver to allow you to go up to whatever you need based on the grade range, based on a lot of it. Sometimes it's based on special education components that the allowable square foot table that the state created didn't necessarily contemplate way back in the day. So we wanted to provide these baselines under this baseline understanding to kind of ground you in the conversation tonight from the ed spectrum. So why this is important is because everything that we do, not everything that I look at is how can we get best value for the community, right? And when you do the math, you want to stay with the 519 because it's going to give you a bigger allowable area, bigger reimbursement, right? It's your base reimbursement in the center of this slide for renovate as new. The term RNV baseline is 80.71. For new, 78.33. I think, I'm not sure how many meetings Scott has had with you already, but that delta used to be 10% for years. It used to be reimbursed, RNV used to be 10% more than new. Since August, when they republished the reimbursement rates, many communities have seen those numbers go closer. We believe, and this is, I guess, anecdotal, is that renovation costs have crept up because of the variety of different reasons. Some of them environmental, the costs related to that. Some of them are phasing and logistics and sequencing. But the fact of the matter is many communities have seen these numbers come closer together. So renovate as new on the left side of the slide is 80.71. New construction is 78.33. If you submit a grant application prior to June 30th this year, those are the published rates. Those will change every year. There's a couple other pieces that I think this community, I'm going to try to go faster. Sorry, because I don't want to get this. A couple other components that are of interest, that 15%, we know you got the special legislation for that, for they call it early childhood, right? So we would take your renovation base reimbursement plus 15% or your new reimbursement plus 15% and apply it the moment to the entire building. there's a little bit of a gray area there because it says elementary school. I don't know how far we can stretch that interpretation. For the moment, we're saying it applies to your entire project. There's another component about specialized education. The reason why they put that in there is many communities without place are trying to bring students to their home schools. That 15% is just for the program space. So if you put a room like that in your program, you're only getting that additional 15% on that home space. Okay, so those are the baseline. And again, anecdotally, just what we're trying to get after here is a general understanding of how these mechanics work. So your existing square footage was at 100,000, your new is at 90,000. When you compare those without a space waiver to the allowable area and you adjust for gross and add those kinds of things, and we can argue about the percentages, but generally speaking, your delta for your existing is 21,000 square feet, your delta is 10,000 square feet. So what that means is if you don't get a space waiver, the community is paying 100% of that out of pocket. What that does when you do the math is, and again, consider these drafts and they can be up and down. It means that the more you're over the allowable area, the less you're going to get a reimbursement because it reduces your effective reimbursement. So just look at what we're dealing with today. On the existing side, it reduces your start to 73.69. On the new side, it's 80.2. So they're in the range that will be adjusted. There's a lot of conversation ahead of us, but that's the mechanics behind.
Jeff, that's including the extra 15%.
That is including.
You mentioned it.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at in the areas in blue and the aqua, you're provided everything's eligible from a space standard perspective for a renovate is new, renovating the existing square footage of the building. We would be at 93.21% reimbursement. For new construction, you would be at 90.83. Now, both of these numbers assume there's no project out there that is 100% eligible. There is always ineligibles that are a part of every school construction project. We conservatively estimate that there's a ineligibility in your baseline project. So that 93 number, that 90.8 number, 0.5% ineligible.
What, could you just repeat the renovate number?
93.21.
Thank you.
Right.
So a good example, and I'll turn it over to Antonio to go over that spec. A good example of an ineligible cost is if you have to go down the street 250 linear feet to connect to a water line, anything outside the property line, that's an ineligible cost. So we carry 2.5, sometimes with a complex renovation, 3.5 to be conservative in the budget planning.
Even sidewalks that you would conventionally put on the street of your property maybe off of the property. The state is very particular when you're going in front of the PCR review to identify what that project limit line is, which is your boundary. And most municipalities have a setback from the road where your sidewalk will be fronted back. So as part of the strategy moving forward, is there an opportunity to move that in a little bit so you can get reimbursed?
What was the percentage for the new, including the?
90.83.
And not to complicate it, but if you can prove through analysis that new construction is just as cost effective as renovation, you'll get the higher percentage. That caveat was much more important when the deltas were 10%. But we worked with Colliers in Madison, and their delta was 10% because it was a few years ago. They got the extra 10% retroactive. So something to keep in mind as we move forward, but that delta is so close now that it may not be as important. Okay.
educational specifications, so, we know that, the BOE, and the building committee are well versed in the educational specification overview for the community. The educational specifications is essentially, a list and a description of all the spaces in your building. And it wants to be as comprehensive as possible because it is also connected to your reimbursement. So when the state reviews your project, if there are components in your building that are not listed in your educational specification, those are not eligible for reimbursement. So when we look to develop this list and when we look to the narrative components as well, we really want to be as comprehensive as possible in those descriptions, but not restricting us in such a detailed way that we're speccing things like technology systems that may be outdated when you go to actually build the product. So it's a balance between describing everything that you want, but being general enough to give yourself flexibility a few years down the road when you're going to select products. With that said, the superintendent, thank you, has prepared 2 documents. So the one with the yellow header at the top and the approved 2025 stamp as a watermark, that was where we were at before. And the second document where you see some text in red, those are the proposed modifications that we will discuss today. And we just inserted these couple pages from your ed spec. We know that there is a good, 40 other pages that are the narrative component as well that describe your vision, your pedagogy, and all of these spaces in detail. So just for the community at large, there's a lot more than 4 pages to your ed spec.
So, and Tony, I'm realizing that some of our friends that are on virtually don't have the benefit of the handout. So what I can do, Chair, is I can exit out of the PowerPoint, see if I can find that PDF, bring it up on screen, so.
Justin has it ready.
Give me 20 seconds.
Stopwatch.
Stop sharing, so everybody see on 100 emails.
I'll keep riffing. So the ed spec has been developed in terms of like core components. So as we go through, you'll see that we've collected spaces into different buckets. So we'll move through your core academics, your specials like art and music. We'll talk about special education, and then we'll go into your administrative spaces, some of your common areas like your gym and caf. And then at the end, there's also a very technical tally of all of your building systems, spaces, and then your net to gross square footage. So as we move through the document, we'll go through each of those individual categories. Almost.
Time's up.
I'm right there.
And Joni, you need to stretch it a little bit longer.
Yeah. I don't want to be scared. I'll share a little anecdote. When we were touring one of your buildings, there was a pig painted on one of your boilers, and that made me very baby. I am a pig parent, so I was glad to see that. Awesome, Justin, thank you. And with that, perfect. So I think the most important component is where we're going to start in your core academic classrooms. There are other modifications that we'll talk about, but what was presented before was reflective of that the lower enrollment, and it warranted a 2 classroom per grade level scenario. But with the updated 519 enrollment, that is now warranting a 3 classroom per grade level model. So the majority of the increases is in the quantity of the classrooms, and we did increase slightly the area within each classroom, the floor area within each classroom, and we'll explain why. In pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, those spaces went from 850 to just a little over 1,000, 1,100 when you include that toilet room, because we all know with the littles, there's furniture, there's zones within those classrooms for different components. So providing that additional square footage for the pre-K and the kindergarten facilitates those instructional models. And you're also still within the state guidelines of 1,200 square feet for those rooms. So we've met in the middle a little bit. So we're still being economical with the space. providing what is feasible and tailored to the educational needs, but certainly keeping an eye on the overall gross square footage. Similar mindset for the grades 4 and 5 to 8 classrooms. We did increase those from 725 square feet to 825. So that provides just a little extra space within the classroom. We know that the district as a whole would like to keep these student to teacher ratios around that 16 to 17 students per class. You know, that is where the community really feels that is an important value to have within their educational experience. So we have slightly increased those classrooms to be able to still be mindful of those student teacher ratios and models, but provide a little bit of growth within those classroom areas. Oh, yes, thank you, Jeff. The state guidelines for those classrooms is 900 square feet. So you're within you're within the benchmark of those. That's a great thing. So all in all, we've made those adjustments to the areas. We did find that you see a flex classroom was previously allocated. Even with the 16 to 17 students per teacher, we can maintain those ratios without the need for that additional flex classroom. So we're able to economize there. And then you also see the STEAM room. We have moved that into the media center category because we heard there was some adjacency between providing some CTE experiences for your middle school curriculum with close distance to that media center to be able to research and create that project-based learning scenario. So you'll see that program has just relocated to a different category. I'll pause there. Any questions or discussion around academic classrooms and these are the things.
Just a comment. I think it's, in your opinion, the reduced square footages from the state guidelines is achievable without sacrificing programming based on class size, projections that were. So we're not
right.
We're not saving at the cost of education, of learning environment, saving it.
Correct. This is not a sardine model. You have space to move within these classrooms. Absolutely. It's close to that state where it's close to the state guideline. 100%. That was well said.
So, do you guys have any questions? You, as a board, you were talking about flexibility and do we have to add the additional space towards the classrooms? That's what's there. They've done. And I think Antonio can speak to that. But I think that that's one thing that you paused at when you and class had this discussion was now 519 on the enrollment study. Where does that square footage go? Tecton has put it to class. Speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the flexibility within the class.
So yeah, that 519. So they were talking about if we didn't achieve that 519, they were and we had these spaces that were set because they're really in the elementary side. What do you do with that space? That was where you landed, correct? Am I yes. So, and I think the recommendation from Tecton is really they have to be elementary, but because if you hit your number, but if not, how do you make those adjustable questions? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we go through that design phase, we talk a lot about small learning communities. So I think within those small learning communities, there are general classrooms, there are specialized education classrooms. There are connections to a main street that has resource rooms and other specials and things like some STEM rooms as well. So I think if you see some transformation in your enrollment happening, whether it be a grade bubble moving through or not quite hitting that 519 enrollment, I think the design can provide some flexibility in how those learning communities are crafted to be able to utilize those classroom spaces for other programs like specialized education or STEAM spaces or community focused areas. So I think design can help craft some flexibility within those spaces. And a thing that we'll see as we move through the ed spec is, not only is the 825 square foot the average existing classroom. So your students and teachers are familiar with that space, but we've also created other rooms like your world language, like your health room to be that 825. So there's maximum flexibility within your educational program so that a teacher, if a health teacher has to move to a different teaching space based on how the program evolves over time, they're moving into an 825 room that they're familiar with that's equipped with the same technology. So it gives you that plan efficiency.
Two questions. Number one, which was the room you said you moved up to the media, near the media center, the stadium? Okay, very good.
Yes.
When you measured the schools, do you remember what the classrooms are now?
They are around, the general classrooms average around 825. There's variation within that for sure. But your grades 1 to 8 in general, average out to that 825.
Perfect. So then the teachers would have the same space.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just say something about that? And
Yes. Sure.
in your number, if you just think about, thinking about, the upper wing and center. Part of that square footage is that big giant closet in the middle of the room, or the far end of the room. That is not usable space. So there's multiple classrooms that have that, so even at B25. There's many rooms in the upper wing that don't have usable space. And I don't remember if we solved the issue, but you were looking at the pipes in the last one, where do those pipes go down?
I couldn't get into the,
Couldn't figure out where pipes were.
I will.
You probably did more. So I just think that's important to know in the
Yes.
usable space.
Yes. Thank you. That's
Great
great.
point.
Speaking for myself, I'm very excited because when we did our original ed specs, we were keeping 2 per grade level with a flex class just in case we had a bubble. So I'm really excited that we have the potential to have 3 if we need.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
You'll hear us, when we're moving into design and adjacencies, you'll hear us talk about small learning communities. And a strata of this grade level is, you're not going to have a first grade wing, a second grade wing. It's going to be early elementary, upper elementary, middle school, likely. And within that, there will be the grade levels that are associated with those age groupings. So as Antonia mentioned, there is space within the SLC or the small learning community to handle a bubble classroom if it's moving through first, second, third grade. Having that roster of classrooms with the appropriate support spaces, special education, intervention rooms nearby, and support that temporary influx of a bubble classroom. And that's not, an 825 square foot classroom, though the desire is to have student to teacher ratio in 16, mid-teens, mid to upper teens. An 825 classroom can support 20 to 22 students within the classroom. Not wants to go, but it gives further flexibility in the planning of a higher enrollment. As Jeff mentioned, 519 is to your benefit to use to increase your allowable square footage and your maximum reimbursement. We know from everybody that we've talked to so far, there's some skepticism that you're actually going to hit that. But again, it's to your advantage to use that number.
All right, wonderful. So moving into the specialized academic rooms and your encore programs, we start with, I think art largely stayed the same. That's very close to the state guidelines of 1,200 square feet. So we have 2 art rooms, figuring one is that elementary focus and one is your more middle school focus teaching spaces. I think the biggest changes here were in the sizes of some of your music rooms. So the instrumental music or your band room, we increased that square footage to be comparable to the existing band room at Hall Memorial. So you'll see that 1,600 square foot number. That will accommodate a larger band with all of their stands and room for their musical instruments. So that is matching what's existing today. We also increased the size of the general music and chorus space to 1,100 square feet. Again, within that, the state guidelines of, I believe it's 12 or 1,300 for chorus. And that will allow around 30 students, again, with their musical stands, to be able to be within that space and practice. There is also, you'll see it in the future buckets, the stage still exists. So that is not only an area for performances, but if there is a third music space that is needed for curriculum, you'll have that available as well. So highlighting that the other changes in this category are the world language in the health classroom. As you see, we just matched those square footages to your general facility.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Yeah.
I live in the Bermuda Triangle over here, sorry, so I'm really having a hard time tonight. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
We can hear you, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to comment on the, I'm with my son, so, sorry. He's 4. I wanted to make a comment on the the additional classrooms that now we're going from 2 to 3. And that was a concern of mine before because we currently have 3 and that seems to be per most grade levels. And that seems to be a pretty big concern for a lot of our parents. So I am happy that I guess with this additional student enrollments that we are able to get those additional classrooms per grade level. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. So the last item here at the intervention rooms, you'll see what we did is we've essentially taken a similar square footage as you previously programmed, but we started contemplating them in terms of elementary and middle school to Justin's point about the small learning communities. If these can be closer to your general education classrooms and fit those small groups of students between 3 to 5, meeting with their interventionists, then that square footage could come down a little bit and provide more smaller spaces closer to those small learning communities. So that was the change that you see reflected in the intervention.
And if I'm not mistaken, you guys said those sizes will allow for flexibility of use because you're concerned about the classroom beyond that. So this is, I think, to your point, more appropriate.
Yeah. Okay, great.
We could theoretically have 2 in each wing. I'm thinking not 100%.
100%, that's the plan. And they could also, if we would like that flexibility of a larger space, they could be co-located with the opportunity to expand into one larger space or become 2 smaller spaces. So as the design evolves, we can talk about that flexibility. I'll move faster because I know this is, guys have.
Before, sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I didn't hear you speak to the science prep room.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So back in the core academic classrooms towards the top, there was discussion around the 2 science rooms. If those share one prep room, that's some economy. And oftentimes there's economy in square footage, but also economy in some of the equipment that you'll outfit those prep rooms with. So we thought if they can share that space, that would just provide some savings. Okay, thank you. All right, so on the back, specialized education at the first page. Largely this stayed the same. You'll see in the original, there were 2 self-contained classrooms, but only one had that bathroom and they were slightly smaller in terms of square footage. So we have kept the 2 classrooms, but we've given each their own bathroom and we've just increased the space in those classrooms to 900 square feet, knowing that even though there's fewer students within those rooms, they likely will come with a lot of equipment. There's equipment within that space that needs to be accommodated. So giving those rooms even slightly larger square foot areas than a typical classroom, we thought that would benefit that program. And I believe the state guidelines outline something around that 12, that either the 900 or slightly higher for those spaces. So we're right on benchmark there.
That's, sorry, this space gives the extra 15%. Yes.
That those are the classrooms. That's great point.
Not the entire space, just the classrooms.
Right.
So it's premium space.
Yeah, you can't, yeah, there is a line, you can't go over the 100%.
Yes.
Yes, they're not gonna pay, they're not gonna pay you to, bounce. Nice try.
That was the space that, talking to the services director, of keeping kids in district where we need to build that same model that we have in elementary school into the middle school. That's the second.
We have the data. If we have 7 outplacements. If we need
Spaces
data to
support.
prove we have a need,
Yeah.
we have that data.
Excellent. That's very good. All right, and then just a minor increase to the OTPT space. We also know we're incorporating a swing within that room, so we've just slightly increased that square footage area as well.
Does that count under the special, can you point out what counts under the special ed waiver as we go?
Sure, we feel it's really just those 2 self-contained classrooms
Okay.
that would benefit from the extra 15%. Yeah, still, I mean, everything counts, right? But yes. Administrative services. So within the administrative services, you have your main office, your nurse's office, your teacher workrooms, etc. So the changes here, pretty minimal. We just the text in red for administrative office is largely just because we've split those out for the purposes of tabulation. So nothing really changed in terms of quantity or sizes for your administrative offices, but we just split those out from the 2 that were previously listed. So we wanted to call attention to that. We still have a total of 3 conference rooms, 2 within your administrative services. Your 3rd is within your specialized education. So in terms of meeting spaces, there are 3 areas throughout your building for conferencing. And what we've done is we have just slightly increased your larger conference room from 200 square feet to 325 to fit 10 to 12. So that you really have 2 more medium-sized conference rooms and then a larger conference room. And same goes with proximity. We can talk about if 2 want to be somewhat located to expand even further, we can talk about that some time.
What do we current for conference rooms?
Good question.
That
I would have, that's,
depends on what you want to call it. conference.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
So center school has a
Picture centers.
the regular conference room and then all the way by the gym. And they have added space where they can find another space to sit. It's not, there's nothing in center, that's sort of the secondary one. If you go to hall, there's what is a closet with no windows in Marcia's suite. That is a table that's the secondary one there, and it's the main one of the main office.
Okay.
That hall.
yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Nurses area. With the we need 1 or 2, or
That's, we're going to sort through that.
we're not there yet, but I'm wondering if there's space, if we did have a need for 2, would there be offices and space?
What?
Nurses.
2
nurses?
If there were 2 individuals.
500 kids? 500 kids?
Well, we'll talk about that, but
Yeah.
if in the event that, there was, would there be space?
So what's currently programmed, you have in addition to the nurse's office and the area for 3 cots, there's an exam room, a private exam room, and a private isolation room. So we've seen those 2 spaces really as, like if another nurse came to be within the program, perhaps the isolation room can be converted into a second office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
So that said, the nurse all in all, in the total square foot assigned to the nurse mostly has stayed the same. We did just add another toilet within that space just to provide some backup, or if you have multiple students, just provides a different a second option for that program area. So workrooms, we've increased from 2 to 3, thinking, as Justin said, the small learning communities. You have your early elementary, your upper elementary, and your middle school. So if each of those learning communities has a teacher workroom right there nearby, that quantity of 3 helps us do that. And same goes with the associated storage. We also added an office for the BCBA. We know that there's that program, and that personnel is likely going to be a position that's coming up to the schools, and so we wanted to just provide a office to accommodate. Yeah, that's right. All right, any questions on the administrative case? All right, common areas. Common areas include things like your learning commons, your cafeteria, and your gym. A lot of the square footage here is primarily within the back of house kitchen that we've added, to be honest. So we gave a little bit of extra space for a walk-in cooler in addition to the freezer, some additional office and locker areas and custodial areas associated with the kitchen. So you'll see those added kind of in the center. The learning commons is towards the top where we've increased so we brought that STEAM room from the early elementary into the media center and increased that square footage area to be able to offer things like cooking programs, robotics programs, if there are trades programs that want to come into that space, for HVAC maintenance, etc. This can be a flexible STEM/CTE room connected to the learning commons to be able to provide that. And we know there's a TV studio and some digital learning programs also happening, so we're accounting for that in terms of some small group breakout and reporting areas. Okay. The 2150 versus the 1816 for the learning commons. You'll just see that we've essentially just pulled out that classroom. So that's why the overall number seems to have gone down, but it's comparable when you fold in that STEM classroom and some of the buildings. Right. Cafeteria, we increased slightly. There's a state formula that is a third of your enrollment times 17.5 square feet per student, and that gives you the size of your cafeteria. So when we take out pre-K, who we assume will eat in their rooms, we did that 495 students divided by 3 times 17.5, and that's how we arrived at the size of your cafeteria. So it looks like a very exact number because it came right from that calculation. And we talked about the kitchen back of house areas. We added a gross motor multi-purpose space, thinking that this could be another area for presentations, for some arts fairs, some book fairs, an expansion space. If your band needs to break out near the stage, we could start to think about co-locating things like this multi-purpose space with your performance areas, as well as offering it as an indoor recess and movement area for some of your early childhood.
For this strata of students, we'll commonly see these spaces be an alternative PE space. Even though your gym is going to be correctly sized, and when you separate it by overhead curtain divider, you can run 2 gym classes at the same time. However, in the event that the gym's being used for a full period, the full gym, a lot of times these gross motor spaces serve a PE function or a recess function for some of our youngest learners, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, first grade.
Well said. Any questions on those common areas? All right.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
The stage, will it be big enough around the sides for like when a productions happen? That they can have all the materials inside? Or could they utilize this multi-purpose space if they use it close enough to do that, or?
We certainly could contemplate that for sure, that adjacency. There will be some areas around the stage. I know there's the stage and the wings have that additional area built into that square footage. Things like music rooms are also good adjacencies to the stage. So we can definitely think of additional areas that are larger, that are in close proximity. That's a great strategy. Yeah. Yes, it's a great strategy.
But what I would say is include that language in your ed spec. If you don't call out that specific adjacency now, say that that's a desired adjacency. Because it may be tech time designing your building, once you get through a referendum, it may not be, but hopefully will be. pass anything down to you guys, but just so the architect knows, if you know, you've discussed this now, so if there are things like that, adjacencies and things, make sure you include them in your ed spec, because it's a guide to help the design team put together the school that you really want.
If, with the stage, what do you see for seating?
So
I'm
Yeah.
jumping ahead. but
No,
just ideas.
for seating, yeah, we think that the stage what we've seen, some other communities do, if the stage could be in between your gymnasium and your cafeteria as one option, that gives you flexibility with that space to open up to a gymnasium for a large performance, seating around 300, 350, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong. And then the cafeteria, fronting, yeah, the cafeteria is on the other side, that could be a smaller venue.
So we think of when you front the stage on a gymnasium, we think of that as like an all-school assembly, right? So you can fit your entire student body in the gymnasium for an all-school assembly, utilize the stage for that purpose. A lot of times there may be nights, practices, other events that the gym's being used, there may be a visiting author or a lecture that may require a more intimate setting. Three of our last elementary schools have utilized the placement of the stage so that it can front for the gymnasium for a larger gathering, or the cafeteria for a smaller PTO meeting, book of the month club, whatever. The world is your oyster on how we can envision it.
Could they be combined for big, something huge, something like we love our plays, the big productions, right? And I'm just wondering what, coming out of folding chairs like these, what would the seating look like,
Yeah.
What are people using?
For sure. So I think in the multi-purpose or the gross motor space, that could be your opportunity to do some telescoping, more like actual seating that can fold away into the wall when it's not being used, or pull out when that space needs to be used. We've seen those commonly used in those types of areas that transform into more of a black box theater type space. Because we imagine your gym will probably have the bleachers associated with for your athletics program. So your multi-purpose gross motor space might be the opportunity to put more of those theatrical cushion nice seats that can still fold out of the way.
So there's always a phase of these projects that are called FF&E, or furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And one of the things when we're purchasing the type of furniture or seating in a gymnasium, we have to demonstrate that it can also be stored. That's one of the things that the state really wants to see. We can't just show 500 chairs out there. We gotta show them being on a dolly and the appropriate storage space for them. So that will be part of all of the planning that's involved for those spaces.
And speak a little bit, I mean, there's opportunities, these buildings are laid out that these spaces can be utilized for community use potentially.
Yeah.
Outside of school hours while still maintaining security, and separation from the school building proper. So I think there are elements of this where this ties into the ability for the community to engage with this project as well.
We've yet to design a school project where some element of community use has not been at the front and center, making sure that you can do nights, weekends. I like to say old man basketball, if there's a rec league or something that can utilize the space. So paying attention to where those academic or those general curriculum spaces are versus where those public curriculum spaces are, and design them in a manner to be flexible for that community use as well.
It's also our emergency spot for the town. So one other thought when it won't be. This won't be. Thanks. Sorry.
That's okay.
So, yeah.
Didn't get the memo.
It won't be because it won't be, they have to do very specific things.
Um,
And it's gonna change what they have to do, and it's gonna cost you a lot more money, and maybe Mike McCoo can chime in on this, but I believe that Region 19 has turned into your regional emergency center because Red Cross can't staff every location. This could be like a cooling center.
Right.
Or, you know, there's a go plug in. But it wouldn't be your true emergency center as Paul is today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, most of our buildings are designed as warming and cooling centers, not necessarily emergency shelters because of that. Yeah.
The FEMA requirements for blast protection, lateral forces, et cetera, just are far in excess of what we would commonly design for schools.
Antonia,
Yeah.
what Ann is asking you about the bleachers is that I've shown them all sorts of pictures of amazing folding things. The gold standard to just straight, just to show what could be.
Okay,
And so the stackable bleachers do exist with seat backs.
Sure.
yes.
So something like that, that is not necessarily we're not talking about the full cushion necessarily that you might see for a theater, but something that could be a little bit of an upgrade for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what you're asking about, correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, almost there, almost there. Everyone's favorite category, service areas and back of house. Very important stuff. Not much has changed here. The addition of a couple custodial closets. Again, just bringing those closer to the different learning communities, different areas of the building, and some instructional storage. Those were really the modifications to the back of house. And then, as Jeff and Justin spoke to, we have calculated just if you add up all of the different program elements that we've listed, that program total is 71,833. What's missing from that is the actual thickness of your walls, your stairwells, some of your mechanical chases, some of the circulation in your corridors. And we estimate that that amounts to approximately 25%. So we've added that additional square footage. So the gross square footage is 89,791 square feet. And you see that's around that 10,400 delta above your allowable area. So when we saw those earlier slides, it definitely is higher, but it's lower than if you were to renovate both of your existing buildings today. That delta would be a lot greater. And again, this can refine. Once you're done with your project, you have one chance to revise your educational specification. And to steal what Jeff usually says, most communities wait till you actually have your project built. And then they revise their educational specifications, submit it to the state, because that's when the state will go through and say, you have this built, is it in your ed spec? You have this built, is it in your ed spec? So that's when you really want to cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure everything is covered so that you can maximize your reimbursement. So we are going to do our darndest to get this as close to programmatic vision and then refine it.
So I just have a question on the service areas.
Yes, great.
I know I just walked to school the other day and it was actually brought to our attention that like they pay extra to have a drop gate truck come to their thing, their cafeterias and stuff like that. So would it be a beneficial savings to put in the ed spec about a loading dock or something?
Yes, to that end, I actually calculated the inefficiencies from that, and I came over $11,000 annually from lost time productivity and from additional drop gate things for not having a loading dock and a ramp door.
Right.
So loading dock and a ramp door.
There is a loading dock in the end there.
Okay, so loading dock, but I didn't see a ramp door either, so, because we generate a lot of waste in school, and so getting rid of that waste is important. So trying to do that with lower cost trash receptacle would require a ramp door for that. So
We'll make note of that.
and I did have a couple more things if you're.
Go ahead. No.
So technology in the classroom is obviously pretty heavy right now. They have Chromebooks. I think they have iPads, some other stuff. I didn't see an area for maintenance and administration of those things. Currently I saw what they had in Hall School, which was
a closet with a pile of half repaired things, and it was a mess. The effectiveness of that area was very, very low, I would say. And so I think to maintain those units in a cost-effective manner, we need to sort of a space to administer and repair those.
Yeah.
So, and the last thing I had was, actually two more things. The mechanical workshop area. Currently in Hall School, we have two outside buildings of approximately 360 square feet.
Yeah.
There is no landscape storage. I mean, we have grounds maintenance stuff in hallways right now. That's not efficient. That's not effective. So there's nothing in the spec I see whatsoever for any sort of grounds maintenance stuff.
You're right, there is.
And the maintenance workshop, I think it's 200 square feet. That's completely inadequate. I mean, that's enough for an office maybe. But in terms of actually, you want to actually repair your building and keep it in good condition, you need a more effective workshop area. So.
Do we currently have anybody, or do we have a facilities person that takes care of both schools, or do we just wing it when things go wrong and hire people? I'm very curious. This isn't.
We have a maintenance lead in each building. It's
Okay.
our head custodian, who's now a maintenance supervisor for the folks that are doing the cleaning. They are the prime contact for me for repairs. So there are two fences in town that currently need to be repaired. One with a tree fell out here for our baseball field, where we transport our most school fields to play baseball. And one fence on the softball field at Hall. So I call Steve and say, Steve, I need both fences repaired. He reaches out to the vendor, he coordinates, and then the work gets done. If it's something that's in-house that he can do, hey, Steve, I need this, he will go and do it.
Yeah, those things that we can do in-house will be much more
Right.
cost effective than we have to do externally. So,
Yeah.
And the last thing I had was the generator. We have a full system generator, a standby generator right now in Hall. I do not see anything in the specification. Is that life safety? I mean,
The generator, typically these days we put outside, so it doesn't impact the programmable square footage, but it definitely should be in the educational specification.
okay, yeah, I just didn't see anything.
We will check the body of the spec. Yeah, it's in there.
Okay, I didn't look super
No.
deeply for that one, but yeah, okay.
That's a good point, yeah.
So, and that one can run the entire building. So I don't know what our.
It's not just life safety.
No, it's the entire building.
External generator for the entire facility should be included in the design, is how it's worded right now.
Yeah, that's the right way to work. You don't want to size it right now. Yeah. Until you get to your loads, but
So
I don't know how big that one is. We were walking around.
it's substantial.
It's,
So,
right, I don't know if it's the entire building, but we were debating it. We couldn't get into the panel to see, so it is. But yes, really noted more actually.
that's all the things I have.
Yep.
Any other comments overall? Any comments online?
So, this is.
Board of Ed members are.
Yeah, so ultimately,
Nice.
the ed spec is, while the school building committee is really tasked with helping our consultant team, that's kind of implement. What's required, the ed spec itself is for the Board of Ed document. So it's for what you're comfortable with, what you feel serves the educational need programmatically, is that kind of has to come through you. It's good that we're all at the table so we can understand that as how we got to where we're at, and what the goals were behind the decision the Board of Ed makes. That you guys need to be comfortable with this and be sure that ultimately it reflects the school environment that is appropriate for where they be. Yeah. So we can comment on, we should have a generator and one building functions of this, but programmatically, this is something the Board of Ed needs to be comfortable with. And I think, Scott, we can speak to the timing on this, but this is kind of used as the benchmark for our team to stay on schedule and really start to evaluate the multiple design options in a very short window of time that we've had them doing over the coming months so that we can start to develop a comprehensive budget picture. So I'm not sure
I'll say it more blunt than he is. So,
I don't want to speak to you.
I will say, that's okay, I'll say, you do not have to approve the spec tonight because you just got this. But, unless you feel like there's going to be a big sway, you're gonna say, hey, TechCon, we really love the idea of adding more and you're gonna give that, or hey, TechCon, we just totally dislike X, what you presented. They would like to know that general idea now, so that they can keep working. If you can approve your ed spec, again, at your regular April meeting, it's not going to impact anything on your side, as long as you are not gonna come back to them and say, we really want you to add this. I also know, just because they write down everything that we say, as we did our tour, they took a lot of notes and feedback. That they're probably gonna walk away tonight, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and say, hey, based upon some feedback tonight, we suggest you might want to. And that might be something that I can present at the regular Board of Ed meeting, your next April meeting. And I expect that it would be minor, minor square footage, and Antonio's nodding her head, so I'm going with that. But I think they're looking for, are we on the right path for what they're proposing, and do you understand or have any questions about why and what the changes were from the last ed spec approval you had?
I think we're on the right track. There's nothing.
Yeah, I think it's on the right track, and then I appreciate the increase in classrooms, because that was a very concerning thing to many of us based on conversations with the public about keeping class sizes small. And if we do grow, only having 2 classrooms per grade was going to be challenging to manage. And then some of the other things like the purchase room mapping, and all of it seems to be on the amazing.
The creation of these ed specs for me, I'll speak for me, has been really challenging. Because, well, 3 of us have been in education for decades, and so we know the whole deal. And like Tracy and Ann have said, that lower class size was really bothersome to me. So I am also happy to see that that has been increased because of our new enrollment projections. Things that you changed, switched around and added all make perfect sense to me too. And I didn't really have anything where I was like, wait, what? Which is good. From my perspective anyway. I'm gonna see this in a positive way. When we were making these educational specifications, we were looking at the programs we currently have now, dreaming a little bit now and then about what we want to give our students. But also being very aware of the financial burden upon our townspeople. So because of that, we didn't shoot for the moon. That wasn't the right thing to do. We did have lots of conversations about what if, ooh, maybe, but we did try to be very aware of that. So when you're looking at our original one, thinking, why they do this, this isn't enough, whatever, and that's probably what happened. More about trying to maintain the programs we have now and figure out ways we could add a little bit more here and there, than trying to think about, if we could do everything for our kids, what we could give them. So that's kind of how we got here. And I want to give them everything we can. So, thank you for working with us. I am wondering, sitting here, thinking about how you're going to present this to the public and help them to understand. Comments I have heard have led me to believe that there's misunderstanding about the business of education right now and what it looks like. So like when you talk about your small learning communities, that's for some of us, that's like, our language that we speak, but for other people, that's a totally foreign concept altogether. And if we're gonna make community and having flexible spaces one of our key elements, which I love and totally believe in, there is gonna have to be some explanation to our public about why that's a good way for kids to learn, or why those spaces are needed. And then I was also trying to think of other questions that may pop up, one being like, what happens if we just make an ed spec that doesn't suit the 513 kids? What happens? Right, the state will deny it, what happens? What if we made it for less kids?
Made it for less kids. Gosh, I think it ultimately, I think ultimately the state wants to see that 8-year, that highest projection in the 8-year window, because not only do they not want to see you come back to them, but it's also financially, even though it seems like a bigger number, building that space now versus building some of that space now, and then 5 years from now, when escalation and costs are even higher, realizing you need more space, then building that extra space then is more expensive than if it were just to be accommodated now, and giving you, I think, flexible design with additional space programming, or like we said, if those classrooms need to adapt and flex, having that built now, I think, is a benefit to the community financially and spatially as a resource, versus then having to say, go back to the state when you already have a bond still for this project, ask for more money from the town, build it again at increased cost would be, let me know. Feel free to jump in.
I guess, my question, so you gotta operate on data, right? So your two data points are 415 students in your highest enrollment period versus 519. So our recommendation is to use the higher number so that you can have your highest amount allowable reimbursement, your highest allowable area to leverage for reimbursement. Is the right enough? I mean, we commonly use the data that we have in those projections. And I suppose my question would be, what's the right number? I think you need to use the data point. So it's either one set of data that shows a lower number or the higher set of data that shows the higher.
I mean, I think you'd have to explain to the state, because you've got to file your enrollment projection as part of your grant application. And they're gonna look and they're gonna say, okay, did you pick the highest or what did you pick? And if you go a lot lower than that, the state's gonna come back and say, okay, why are you going lower? What do you know? Is this information even accurate? And they may then question the information. We've seen some communities in the past build a new elementary school and a couple of years later have portables on them. Typically the state, once you build a new school, they're not going to want to see you for 20 years. They're going to say, great, we did this. We'll see you in 20 years when your roof needs to be replaced, but don't come back to us. If you had to put an addition on, that'd be an interesting conversation. But if there was demolition work and work to attach that onto the building, the state says, hey, we've already paid for that part of the building now that you've got to demolish those walls to tie on this new building onto there. So a lot of factors. I can't tell you exactly how they would look at it, but knowing that you've got to file your enrollment projection, your latest enrollment projection with your grant application, and if you didn't follow that max 8-year, I think it would really call into question a number of things from the state.
That all makes perfect sense to me. I completely understand the purpose and reasoning for it, and I'm very happy with that 500 what have you number. When that came back, we were happy to see that.
With that said, I'm sorry, if the state's not going to go through your ed spec and say, with a fine tooth comb in detail and say, we think you're one classroom shy. They're going to take it and they're going to say, this is what the Board of Education of Willington and the town has agreed that they need for this 519 students. Okay, and then they'll look at their space standards and tell you what your reimbursement's going to be. So they're not really going to necessarily comment on your ed spec. They may point out things like, hey, why didn't you include PV? Because they really put a push for PV. But I know I'm sure you've got that in there. But yeah, they're not gonna evaluate it from the standpoint of how are you meeting or servicing the 5910.
I'm asking this question because we're in the middle of budget season right now, and there has been communication from the community, some community members about our class sizes being too low. And so when we try to explain why there are 3 classrooms for a grade level, I very much anticipate that question coming back.
So from a school building committee perspective, for us, who will have to ultimately, work with everybody to implement this, and develop a project that is supported by the community, or that is, there's a necessity as well to, Scott's point, future-proof this to a degree, so that it will serve us for 20 years moving forward. Particularly because right-sizing things now allows us to do it at this higher reimbursement rate that will not exist again. If we had to go back and take a second bite of the apple. With that said, I'm interested in this. I paid attention to all of your discussions along the way, 3 years ago and now in between. There is, I know my perception of this program is that it is efficient for implementing your program now. There isn't even a 3 classroom per grade. I know there's a lot of concerns even in the 4th grade bubble now, where you have 2 larger classrooms because you don't have an additional space, you don't have the ability to kind of split that up. This allows us to do that growth economically if we get that bubble without significant other issues, I think. And I think it's important that we don't have to do this again, and that we do it right the first time. But there's no understand. This is functional for a pre-K through 8 program. At both enrollments, quite frankly. So
regardless of what enrollment that ever happens, if there's a higher number we can use, why wouldn't we use it? We're gonna get more money. I just don't understand it. We're allowed to use it, use the bigger number. It's that simple.
In the town, and none of us will
It's
do
that
this again in
simple.
5 or 10 years.
You
The
know?
last thing we want to do is all of us have to go through this as townspeople again in 5 years, right?
I don't care if this number's right. It's not gonna be. It's never gonna be perfect. But if it's a big number we can use, and we can use an even bigger number, and we're allowed to, let's use it. We're gonna get more money. It's that simple. I just don't get it.
Let me get John. John, sorry, it's hard a little bit to juggle these screen and in the room, but you
No
had your hand
problem.
up.
Yeah, I just didn't see anything in here about the demolition costs of Hall School. It's my understanding that if we do build a new building on the Hall School property, that the demolition costs would also be reimbursable by the state. I wasn't sure if that needed to be in the ed spec or if that's something that gets covered later. That's my question.
That does not need to be in the ed spec.
Yeah, that's not an ed spec, that's project planning and project budgeting. That is the next phase of development that this ed spec starts to work towards.
Thank you.
One point about moving forward, good possibility that there will be early childhood things in the future. So I'm hoping that we can leave a wing open so that we could add on to that week in the future if we do get universal pre-K or any of that within
The ability to
expand.
if something dramatically changes in the way education.
State grant, and we get a state grant to expand to.
There's a new program grant where we can get 5,000 a student annually. So
I think the important point there is flexibility to adapt in the design as it develops to allow for the unforeseen.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the ed spec really addresses it, but it should have a nod to future expandability of the project, since you already installed it.
Yeah, I don't actually recall. So we'll make a note of it.
So we'll, I would say someone is on mine. I didn't know if she wanted to make a comment.
Arthur's on too.
Oh, really? Good. Okay.
Sam, Arthur, if you can hear us, I don't know if you have any comments about anything or questions? If not,
Well written, be sure to put it on our agenda for the. Okay.
so functionally, and we didn't speak to this yet, but you guys can, but I think functionally it sounds like in concept, this is heading the right direction so that we can continue these efforts in between now and any future formal approval, or that you guys can into this, but making sure from this committee's perspective, that you guys have what you need. Continue the wonderful pace you guys are staying on for us, so thank you for this.
Does my suggestion meet your needs? April approval, this is like, would be version 3.0, I think, for us. And then if we get beyond it and design and there's more, you know, it's gonna happen, that just becomes version 4.0, is that what I'm understanding?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that, just to be clear, that one chance to revise the ed spec, that's really for alignment after the fact, once the project's revised, it's separate from
what it is, yeah.
Approving the ed spec as part of the grant
Yeah,
application,
yeah, that's-
just so that.
That's down the road.
Yes, yeah. Any questions? No? All right. Did you guys have?
I'm all for this was extremely helpful and it definitely, it was a great starting point. I think that you guys definitely have, you do a lot for your students. That was evident. We walked through the halls of both of your school, Hall and Center School. Just the joy of your teachers. Everyone was excited to be in the room. The students were engaged. The artwork on the walls was gorgeous. So just from witnessing it firsthand and seeing the thought that did go into your ed spec, I just wanted to acknowledge that everyone is wonderful what you're doing for your students in this district, and we're truly happy to be a part of that. So thank you for the great foundation that you guys have started.
Mike,
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just been kind of soaking this in, and I'm appreciating a lot of the information tonight, especially some of the graphics earlier in the meeting. Really trying to pin down how the reimbursement works for some of the options. I think these are really critical conversations that the townspeople need to see just as much as the committees. And I am hopeful that we, with all of the input we're getting and all of the qualified people on the boards, that we keep working with this very difficult challenge of how to be very prudent with the taxpayer money, but also not build something that only fits this year when we come up with a plan and somehow is as likely to work 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I know I realize how challenging that is. I guess that's what I'm reflecting on is I think we have to be very fiscally prudent, but also somehow try to be as flexible as possible. To Ann's comment a minute ago about if there are options for expansion, and how can we do the best job and make it the most flexible, I guess is the word I'm looking for, to have the building be the most flexible and future-proof as possible, without overdoing it. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mike. You did share a draft of your presentation, which I distributed earlier. I don't know if anything's changed, but if you guys, we'd love to be able to, I guess, share that.
Yeah, we will,
Send an update.
we'll send you the, but I don't think much has changed.
And additionally, You didn't really get a chance to speak to these diagrams, I think it's more, forty bad.
Yeah, they were provided just to kind of set the table for a sense of scale of the spaces and give a graphic representation of all the things you think through when you size space. What the other piece that we'll be working on, I believe, is the room detail sheets that, yeah. We're gonna validate what's written already in that spec. We don't want to reinvent it, but we want to make sure the room detail sheets. So every program element really can have a room detail sheet that talks to what's in it verbally. So, and then we'll also check, some of the building systems narratives to make sure that they're in alignment with what we're. So yeah, the graphics, although we didn't go over them, I think it's a graphic representation of like when we talk about the conference room is a good example. When we talked about the size of conference rooms and the amount of people in there, you have to think through kind of the logic on how they would be laid out. So that's why those were included.
These are typically somewhat scaled towards the size of spaces that are captured in our program. Correct. Saying this again, well, for your understanding. Did you also share a copy of this for the members who aren't here in the room?
Yep.
Just so I can send that along, because I don't think we saw this anywhere. Yep. Thank you. Absolutely.
So Jim, if I can just kind of summarize action items. So I guess, again, just to clarify, based on the comments this evening, the design team is going to start working on both a renovation, addition, alteration on the existing hall school, middle school, as well as creating a new build. Because what we need to do then is they will get me the square footage and that information. We're going to build two budgets, one for a renovation option, one for a new build option. We will be providing the calculated reimbursement on both options, giving you a sort of a range, a low to high of each one of those for comparison. So, you know, as soon as they get some concept designs, they're going to feed me the data. I'm going to produce those estimates and bring those estimates back to the committee and the board. Just for an understanding of where we are with cost. Again, it's very close, you know, to get that higher rate. If you're going to do a renovation, you've got to prove that building new is kind of right there or a little cheaper to build new than to renovate. You know, so that'll be part of that evaluation of those numbers that we get, looking at those different scenarios.
Yeah, we'll have to talk through. There will be various, I think, iterations or, you know, different alternatives, and particularly as we're talking about potential partial reuse of hall, or, you know, what happens in some of those scenarios. So we'll have to flesh out collectively.
There's
what variants we know we need to prove out on behalf of the community, just so that they have that information. But it has to start with.
And just so this group is aware of what we will start with is your baseline reimbursement rates for renovation and for new. Typically, you know, again, the state, we can assume, or we can talk to, or if we feel it's going to happen, there's very good information to justify it statutorily, to go, let's say it's proved out that it's cheaper to build new and the community selects the new option. We go forward with new. When you file the grant application, you'll still use the new construction grant percent, because the state won't comment on it or provide a letter or say, yes, we agree now, we'll increase it to the renovation rate, we'll give you that extra 2.5%. So we will take the conservative approach of going by the you know, what the state gives us, and then we can talk about or produce if and when we get this additional reimbursement from the state, which we feel our probability is, let's say 90% getting that, this is the benefit that it'll do to the option. But we can't guarantee it, because the state is the state of Connecticut. We don't know how they're going to react. You know, as well as we're still trying to clarify some of the language on the extra 15% for the early childhood, and whether specifically the statute or the language passed by the legislature says for an elementary school. Well, this is an elementary and middle school. So are they going to apply it to the entire building, or are they only going to apply it to the portion that houses the elementary levels? You know, so we don't want to overpromise or do those calculations without having clarity on how the state's going to do it. And once we get that clarity, we can provide those numbers.
And just so the Board of Ed is aware, we are actively engaged in doing what we can aggressively to find those answers to the degree that we can get them. You know, we're at 2 weeks on board, although it feels like it's been a very long time already, but pleasantly long. We're at the early stage of that process in developing what those comprehensive budget pictures are, but we're working, trying to get those answers, and we probably won't have them. Scott's, you know, thinking, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 steps, you know, down the line, and what we need to do, we need to get a budget picture together, multiple budget pictures together.
Yeah, we have heard that the state is supposedly going to be issuing some guidance, some language to guide us on some of these questions we've posed to them. I haven't even seen a draft of that language, so you know, one, we don't know what that guidance is going to be, if it will be as detailed as we'd like it, until we don't know what the timing of that guidance is at this point. But we will do our best to again follow what we understand is the current statute, and then provide you the add-ons to say, if our understanding is correct and we're able to secure this, this is going to be the result.
Can I ask one more down the road question? At the beginning, you mentioned hall and the possibility of maintaining a little portion of it. Well, how did you visualize that? How did you, what were your thoughts about that? I'm just wondering. And are you at that point that you answer? Or is
The whole thing in 2 weeks.
So, yeah, I was trying to pat that.
If you can answer, you don't have to, but I'm curious.
I'll speak to just, so in, when we were thinking about this project and interviewing for this project, we did explore the option of keeping the original hall, school building, and explored an option where, you could circulate around that existing building, and then the pre-K 8 school could be more on the, as the topography slopes down, we could leverage that topography to be able to create a multi-story building towards, I guess, the left or the rear of the site. So it could be a nice approach to be able to see that history as you're moving through, to approach the new school itself. In terms of use and what that building could be, we didn't get to that level of detail, but just in terms of a site test fit, we did explore the option to keep that building. And it definitely had some benefits and some challenges. It definitely limits your recreational availability, you know, for fields and that type of thing on the site. Yeah, so I think that will be the conversation that's coming. If this is a valuable asset to maintain, is it worth, you know, is the benefit worth some of the challenges and what that discussion is? And are there other ways to honor the existing building through the reuse of some of those existing materials, through maybe something in the landscape that acknowledges where that building once stood, and then some architectural design decisions in the new school to be able to complement some of the existing architecture.
One other idea that it's way up there is we had talked last time about the possibility of auditorium. Not that it can be part of this project. I know that that's not part of this, but that to me what might be the nice the hall building. Truth. But anyway. Yeah. I'm up here with like Brianna was talking about before. I'll come back there.
Thank you for sharing.
The one thing that I'll just add is the thought process here is that we understand that the existing building, it has a lot of sentimental value in the community. And though any process that involves decommissioning or demolishing it needs to include the people that have supported the building, to allow to have a voice in the aesthetic and the architectural moves of a new building that will be built on the site. So, you know, I think we're going into this eyes wide open that we need to have that conversation, and that needs to be part of the design for Willington here. So.
All right. So for action items, we're good for tonight. You have what you need. The Board of Ed is going to revisit at your next meeting, about potential formal approval of some variation, but Bill, you're going to incorporate, you're going to double check the comments that were made tonight. Yep. That they're captured correctly. Yep. Also, I think we didn't address it, but exterior spaces. I know that is in the ed spec. We didn't address it tonight, but just making sure that that reconciles with what we need. Because that's a big component. So start working at how this fits on the spaces. So that's it. You guys are good. Thank you very much. We will see you again very soon. We only have the present speak again. You guys want to hang out and hear the community. I think that would be great. So moving on, next up is present to speak. I see a hand up already. I see a couple of hands up already online. So we'll go straight to that. So what I'd ask is if you would like to make a comment, please unmute yourself and identify yourself for the record. As always, I like to see these being constructive conversations. So I'd ask that you please try to keep it so. And with that said, Ralph, we'll start with you. I saw your hand up first.
Good evening, everybody. Ralph Tillers, Village Hill Road, Willington. Scott, Mr. Pellman, good to see you at the table again. As most of the committee knows, I don't know that your guests know. I'm a lifelong resident of Willington. I'm a professional engineer. I went through both schools, so I have quite the history. One thing that I think needs to be kept in mind is a lot of the community does want to keep the core building, and me especially. Anyway, that's one thing. But listening to some of the things that were discussed tonight, I just want to confirm or question or help some of them. When we were talking about collapsible stage, collapsible seating for a gymatorium or cafetorium or whatever, I think that makes a lot of sense, particularly with the technology we have. You just look at a major concert in a field somewhere, what can be set up for temporary stage. There's no reason why there's components that can't work in a school. I agree with the comment about service and delivery docks. I think that's an absolute necessity, as well as maintenance and storage and a generator. Regardless of what final space we come up with, I think things should be configured as best we can for some 15-year in the future expansion. It would also be nice to stick with a multi-story. The terrain at that site makes a lot of sense for a multi-story building. And we still have the opportunity to put the pre-K younger grades at grade level, even at that. Okay. Earlier discussions, there was, I seem to recall some comments that the partial demolition at Hall, if we were adding on, could be covered by the grant. I'm not sure. And I think that's something for Mr. Pellman to chase. Let's see. Any demolition is probably going to have to go to town meeting or a public hearing. So that's something that the committee needs to keep in mind. Let's see. Okay, back to some of the other things. When dealing with the public on this, I think it would be helpful to produce a table with our existing space, number of classrooms, square footage dedicated to classrooms, and the core facilities existing as it sits today and what the ed spec requires. I think the public needs to see the comparison in space requirements and somehow explain why. Okay. On the enrollment projection, I provided the committee with a graph comparing actual enrollment, the previous enrollment study, and the current enrollment study. And superimposed on that, I put the number of births in Willington. One thing to keep in mind, projections for Willington done by the state of Connecticut or anyone else have never hit the mark. So I think a good explanation of how this enrollment study got to 519 is essential. And I think the public needs to understand that. There was a comment about a bubble classroom. And I like that comment. I like that concept. I think it goes with certain grade levels, but to have a spare classroom for those that bubble of high student moves through the system from pre-K to 8 makes sense. Let me see. What I would caution the committee on is if we go for the extra 15% to try and get to 95, that's great. That's on construction cost. What's the space impact and what's the long-term cost of any expansion of programs provided in the school system? And I think that's all my notes from tonight. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Rob. We'll stay online. Nick Pella. If you're able to unmute, please do so.
Nick Tella, Myrtle Road. In opening, I just want to start by saying, it's frustrating that we only get one opportunity to present to speak. I know in the previous SBCs, they wanted more public engagement and had them in the beginning and end. I recall often. Especially when you have the consultants in the room where comments could be made in the beginning and they could have maybe answered them throughout. Here they are at the end and probably don't have the appropriate time to do so. Personally, I'm a father of 5 kids, and none of which will be attending these schools because of the low standards. And there's many people in town that are homeschooling and sending people to private schools with 4 and 5 kids also. So when we talk about projections, we need to recognize that not every child in this town is entering this system and won't enter this system. Historically, the reality is we had about 600 students in 07-08 by looking at the documents on the Willington school page of the historic numbers. We have now 380 students today. So we have a 37% decline over 20 years. Recent 400, 396, 378, 380. So we basically flat to declining. The 2022 study versus actual, we were, let's see, the study there is seen to be 16 to 35 students under those projected numbers. So even on these low 400 projections, we're still going underneath. Consistency before. The 2022 study showed 419. This NESDC study showed 415. So we're seeing the projections stay in the low 400s. Now we're saying let's use a 519 students, 100 or so student jump there, 35%. And we're saying that this is going to happen in under 10 years. So after 20 years of decline, we're now expecting a 35% increase in less than 10 years. I don't know what's driving that increase: housing, population growth, birth rates. We have fewer families entering the system and lower birth rates going on right now. And Connecticut as whole is seeing a lot of people fleeing this state. We have 415 and 419, now 519. So, Keela, that's not a small adjustment. That's a completely different projection. That tells me that the assumptions changed, not the reality. And if those assumptions are based on flawed or purposely overstated data, then the projection itself becomes unreliable. Right now, I don't see any clear data backing the justification for over 100 students. Without that, there's a real concern these numbers are being built on assumptions that don't reflect what we're actually seeing on the ground. This impacts how it needs to be presented to the state. If these numbers are overstated, even unintentionally, we risk presenting a level of need that's actually not there. As we all know, this region has seen some concerns with costless construction and such like that. Because of this, it makes it even more important that everything is fully transparent and independently verified. Repairs, we've had problems here. Repairs not prioritized, not doing repairs, even though we failed the last push. And it just felt like the Board of Education and powers that be were just pushing for a new building, and here we are again. When it comes to those lines, I'll say here. All right, so in closing here, if we talked about moving forward with new construction, why are we only going about 10% smaller instead of a meaningful right size based on actual trends? Which it kind of, again, it gets confusing to the average person, because you're telling us, hey, we're going to build small even though we're going to go up 35, 37%. It surface level, it makes no sense when you're explaining this to the public. So if enrollment has declined this much, shouldn't that be reflected more clearly in what we're building? And I keep hearing that our only shot at higher reimbursement rate is right now, and it'll never happen again. We were in a situation where we never saw this coming. So I always kind of joke, the only two things guaranteed in life is death and taxes, right? We can't predict that we won't see this again. Who knows if we see something higher? So things change, funding change, conditions change. We shouldn't lock ourselves into a long-term decision based on assumptions, especially if those assumptions are based on flawed data. That may not hold. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I don't see anybody else online. We have two people in the room. Do either of you have any interest? Go for it, Peter.
Peter Latinchich, 97 Fast Road. Nice to have you folks here tonight. Very interesting listening to your presentation. I want to address my comments directly to the committee. When we all attended the meeting at the library a year ago that I spoke about at your last meeting, my sense was there was a feeling of optimism that the significantly higher reimbursement rate, combined with what I would call a scalable project, cost and scope that was sized for our town and our needs, could work. Listening to the Board of Ed tonight and the ed specs they presented, it's clear they have no interest in that to me. They want to push for the maximum reimbursement, and the specification seems to call for that. Well, that seems like a mistake to me. But if we could, as some of the earlier comments made by Ralph and Nick, pursue a project that sized appropriately and not seeking a waiver from what the state's allowing us appears to match our enrollment currently and for quite some time. When we had the referendum 3 years ago, we were told, well, we'll have to apply for a waiver, and then because the reimbursement rate declines, if the state doesn't approve that waiver, then we face an even higher cost. And I don't understand why we're going down that same road again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Good night. All right. That's all the hands I see. So with that said, thank you again, everybody. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you guys for co-hosting with us. How do we adjourn this, Bill?
You can do a motion and
all right. I'm gonna move that we adjourn the school building committee meeting at 8:29 p.m.
I'll second
it. Second is, who called that? Jeremy. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, with that.
I move that we just adjourn this meeting at 8 p.m.
Second.
You know what I mean? Sam and our Tracy.
Aye.
Sam's an aye. I'm an aye. Don's an aye. And Arthur's.
You already lost.
Oh, you already lost. Arthur thing.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.